Yeah, I think this is a very complex kind of answer to it, but I want to make it more simplified in the context of the data that we own than the data that is crowdsourced. And I want to differentiate the two. So the data we own, we have a very robust DevOps that we have created in our environment because we are essentially a data-driven company, and we are built everything in most recently. So we are really cloud native, and we are able to do that with the data that we own. And we found that if you have a robust DevOps environment, we actually can work with our brokers, which is 80% of our employee that uses the data. And with the loop back of the information they send back to us, we can give a correct type of data for them to help their customers and move forward. The second part of it is the products that we do have that actually are crowdsourced. So we really are able to only put safeguards around it for the integrity of the type of data that exists, because those data we essentially don't own and we can't really put so much controls around it. The other element that we actually have added just recently in our organization is that we created a IP strategy which encompasses copyrights and patents and everything else in it, which helps us to be accurate in terms of the type of data we own and the type of data we move forward for our customers.
I'd have to say the Toronto Parking Authority is at the complete opposite end of the spectrum from Avison Young and what Martin's dealing with. It's really in its infancy in respect to data. I was surprised when I came in just over a year ago how little data they were actually collecting, and the fact that they had little understanding of what data they might need to collect to reach their strategic goals. So I think for me, it's really been about working with the people to educate them, to sit down, walk through the strategies that they've developed, walk through the business outcomes they're expecting, and then really nailing down through what data elements are then necessary in order to drive some of those business outcomes. And again, it was just really shocking at the most simplistic level as to what they were missing, being who they are and the service they deliver. And I think, knowing that we need to come out of this pandemic much stronger, the Toronto Parking Authority obviously has been very significantly hit from a revenue perspective. People are not driving into the office. They're not parking in downtown Toronto. We are a profit center and a big piece of the operating budget for the city of Toronto. So in order to come out stronger and really deliver, growth and more money back into the budget for other programs, we really need the right data in the right hands to take it to the next level.
For me, I like to think of data as the technology currency in a company. We want to get as much of it as possible, but the value comes from how we use it. So our goal is to obviously put the right data into the hands of the users to facilitate operational and strategic decision-making. We've already spent some effort to create a data lake to ingest the major data streams. But now comes the hard part of establishing that master data framework to be able to normalize and also make some sense of that data. It's too complex at the data lake level. There is a point where there's just too much data. And I think that the end users do have a really hard time when the volume is too high. So really being able to assemble it, to present it back to them in a way that's a bit more structured, that's a bit more accessible, so that they can then own and use the data appropriately. I think the other challenge that we're facing right now is really more formalization of data governance. IT doesn't own your data. We control and manage and secure the data, but the data is operational data. So it really does need to be owned and governed by those business units who are generating that data. And that ownership and governance, I think, are newer concepts in our organization. So that's something that I think is our responsibility in my group to really do that education for those end users. And as you mentioned, Jeff, having the strong KPIs within the operational areas to be able to identify, what's the output that you want out of this data so that we can work backwards a little bit to verify that we're providing the right information at the right time.
First of all, it's taking it from a business point of view. So the way we built our data culture is ensuring we understand what data we have as an organization that aligns with our business strategy internally, and then what external data we need. So in our example, we sell plumbing and HVAC and all that kind of stuff. So external data that we may have would be big projects going on in Canada rather than just dealing with the contractors. We also look at how that data strategy fits into process and fits into the omni-channel, right? So we want to ensure that the data coming in and the data we receive and the data that we provide is consistent around the customer experience, whether you're dealing with a branch, whether you're dealing with a website, whether you're dealing with a call center. So ensuring that happens also builds a culture of trust and a culture of integrity that you are very confident that the experience you're providing to the customer is accurate and consistent across the channel. And that gives the employees a greater sense of engagement as well. And then all the things that have been said before around ensuring this, the data governance is very important around this. So making sure that you have a strategy around the quality of data. One source of truth doesn't necessarily have to be one system, but you need one source of truth for the different types of data that you have. And you just need to ensure that you have a roadmap, and along that roadmap, you're getting wins along the way so that people, constantly see the value and build, again, that trust and confidence. That comes back to the original roadmap. It's tactical, but making sure you have strong data governance, you have really good, clean data, because that confidence and trust, both internally and externally, just then, it's a domino effect, right? When people have that faith, that trust in the data, it's just going to work for you.
We're pretty early in our journey, but I would say, we started with a focus on two things, and we've expanded it to three. So that, we started with, putting in a strong cross-functional team of, business leaders as well as technology folks who really understand working with the data. And, a focus on business outcomes, right? And that starting point took us, so far, but not far enough, because what we found was that with the business outcomes, they sounded great, but they were really hard for people to digest. And so for us, we added on a third element, which was really, actionable insights. So, for us, we thought the culture would be built by embedding it in people's everyday activities. And you would get that when the data really starts to produce actionable insight. So based off of those three, the approach that we take is taking the business through higher level, more strategic discussions around, what does it mean to win using data? But then, we then translate that back into sort of everyday user stories. What questions are you trying to answer every day? Like, what roadblocks are you hitting? And for us, that's worked really well, because what we found is that people are now starting to use the tools that you put in their hands, right? So the product starts to evolve. It starts off simply with the everyday answers that we need to provide, but we have that anchor of the bigger, more strategic picture that we're trying to address. And I have confidence based on what we've seen, it's starting to grow. And for us, the most important thing is just starting to see the adoption, right? Because before we added on that last leg, people were interested in data, but you would build it and they would not come, right? Because it just, it wasn't answering what they needed to address on a daily basis.
Very much driven by the customer journey and following the customer journey right through the entire cycle of order, build, ship, install, invoice, etc. And following the data as it impacted through that journey, looking at the gaps and trying to identify the gaps that we did have, trying to fill those gaps, similar to what Eric mentioned about what was missing. And I think the real important part is that data conscientiousness, which Catherine mentioned, right? It's your data, not our data. And you have to be very, very conscientious about that. And ensuring that data flows right through, being very conscientious around any process changes, which will affect how the data flows. It could alter the data without downstream, without people upstream realizing that. So making sure everyone is synchronized, which is important. And then on the data governance side, it certainly affects data loss protection. You have to look at your DLP strategy a bit differently. You have to look at your data classifications a bit differently. And I think you have to also look at your storage information architecture and your backup architecture a bit differently as well. Because aside from 2 clean copies, you really should have a 1 copy on immutable media in case of a hack or some kind of ransomware that we might all face, because then it's very pristine. And that all ties back to the other concern around your recovery point objective for your business continuity plan. Having all this data, that could also alter as well. In the end, the customer wins by following their journey. I think we run more efficiently through all the channels, and Eric mentioned that as well, through all our omni-channels. But there's a lot of responsibility down around managing that data, recovering that data, and making sure it is recoverable as well.
Looking at an organization which is largest school district in the country, around 250,000 kids come through our doors every day. Our focus as a district is around achievement, well-being, and equity. So I'll try to connect the data both to those 3 goals itself too. So, and like in any IT shop, we all are leveraging ITOA side, and we're heavily invested into the Splunk platform to help us on IT operational side, how we can actually continuously do service improvement side. So CSI is extremely important to us. So we leverage the ITOA platform for that. Coming back to the academic side of things, there are multiple things we do. One of the things we have in place, since this organization is an evidence-based decision-making process ingrained into the ecosystem, we have a learning opportunity index. I'll explain that. We establish an index, which is actually a combination of 6 other data feeds coming in from the City of Toronto. Those data feeds are such as median family income, percentage of the families whose income is below the low income or before taxes piece, a percent of the families receiving assistance from the government, adults with the low education, adults with university degrees, single parent families. So we actually correlate all that external data also with internals data and the family, saying, where do we really spend more dollars to bring equity across and establish equity across the system itself too. So the LOI actually helps us to saying, these are the 100, 150 schools where we need to actually divert more funds, more resources in form of teachers, or more investment is needed when it comes to technology. So the data helps us to do that. And that's related to the equity itself. On the well-being, we have a strong research department which follows all major projects and initiatives, and also continuously stay in touch with our staff to see where the folks are when it comes to personal well-being and mental health. So we actually leverage that data also to put programs in place so we can actually help our staff and students, because mental health is a big challenge across the entire city of Toronto. And we see it firsthand, how students and staff needs help on that front. When it comes to student success achievement, I think that's the key piece for us to continuously, again, think about where the resources needed to go. When we looked at the last time, I think it's close to 86% of the kids who graduate every year, and 14% are not graduating from TDSB. And it looks like we're doing a good job because it's almost close to 86%. But the 14% number is almost 35,000 kids. That's a huge number, and that now becomes an opportunity for us to rethink why aren't these kids graduating, and where the challenges are. So to me, research department, again, leveraging data from all those initiatives we have on the table to help us to refocus and bring those challenges to the forefront so we can allocate the resources in the right area itself too.